You do get a bit of cost savings from the de minimis, and you get to see which of your products work,
Yeah.
which then leads you to the second option, which
Yeah.
is now I know which product can sell. I'm going to move some of the products into Southeast Asia.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The Southeast Asian market has been on an e-commerce boom due to the availability of technology and penetration of social media and the internet to remote places. The COVID pandemic has only fueled this boom. If you are thinking of capitalizing on this market opportunity, you need to understand how the market works and how you can set up your logistics and warehouse network to make sure you are able to compete with local vendors. In today's episode, our guest, Kevin Lee, shares his insights into cross-border e-commerce practices and challenges for the Southeast Asia market. He also shares his insights into how the Southeast Asian market is different from the North American market and how to penetrate the Southeast Asian market. Finally, he shares different B2C and B2B categories that might be relevant for the market and how to handle strategies such as locations for warehouses, logistics networks, international contracts, and reverse logistics. Let me introduce Kevin to you. Kevin has over 10 years of e-commerce experience, including as Chief Business Officer, Chief Operating Officer at Lazada, Malaysia. He managed a business of over 100 FTEs, driving the e-commerce sales for over 50,000 registered sellers, with a peak of 1 million items on 11/11. He led the Lazada team that cooperated with Alibaba and the government of Malaysia to conceptualize and actualize the digital free trade zone as part of a joint public-private initiative to simplify and drive growth for cross-border trade via e-commerce, logistics, and review of regulations. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Thank you for welcoming to the show. Very happy to be here today.
Yeah, and I am super excited to have you as well because the kind of intel you are going to bring, especially from the South Asian market, I mean, people don't understand how nuanced that market could be and different workflows. So it is going to be so exciting for companies that are either trying to penetrate that market or trying to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be there in that market. Before we do that, just to take things off, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus, Kevin?
Sure. So I have been involved in the e-commerce business for over a decade right now, right?
Okay.
And I started not at the top. I started right in the ground in the warehouse. I was building furniture for a small e-commerce startup in Malaysia at the time.
Yeah.
And I guess I was very hardworking. And I quickly got to experience multiple roles across the organization.
Yeah.
And this allowed me to really see the impact of e-commerce on Malaysia.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, right?
Yeah.
This was, let's say, 2012 at the time.
Okay.
And nobody knew about e-commerce. You couldn't buy anything online at the time. And here I was joining a company that was crazy enough. And I started off small in the warehouse, doing different stuff.
Yeah.
And really seeing everything change.
Yeah.
The landscape of how we got our first sellers to join us, the merchants.
Yeah.
Man, we had people calling on the phones just to convince somebody to try it out.
Oh, wow.
And then where I ended up 10 years later. I
Yeah.
left the company, and the company is called Lazada,
Okay.
which sold to Alibaba in 2016.
Very cool.
And we completed it in 2018. I think a valuation of $3 billion at the time.
Oh, wow.
And then the company has continued to grow, and I decided to do something else.
Yeah.
But like you imagine, from that small of a size to over 50,000 sellers registered and active in Malaysia itself. So
Yeah.
that was really, really a privilege to be able to witness that growth, to witness how not just the sellers but also the consumers change their behavior.
Yeah.
From looking at us as just a deal site, like, hey, can I get that latest iPhone at 50% off?
Yeah.
To saying that, hey, I need something new for the house. I need new clothes. I need
Yeah.
new furniture.
Yeah.
I need new dishes for the kitchen. Let's
Yeah.
check out Lazada
Yeah.
and buy it. So it becomes a normalcy almost to shop online these days, right?
Right.
So through that experience, I was also brought in to work on the cross-border side of business.
Okay.
So this was about bringing in products from out of Malaysia, out of Southeast Asia, into the countries in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
And here we saw immense growth. It was difficult in the beginning because different language,
Yeah.
different types of ways of selling, right? But we brought products in, and in Malaysia itself, cross-border became 20% of all, or 20 to 30% of all products that we sold on Lazada, which
Oh,
was
wow.
immense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the pinnacle of this was I was involved in a project with the Alibaba team. So I was the Lazada lead in Malaysia.
Very
To
cool.
work with the Lazada team and the government of Malaysia
Yeah.
to sort of look at how can we help e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, simplify it and make it easier and make everybody able to sell online. Huh?
Yeah.
I think the last thing maybe about the introduction is I think the past 10 years,
Yeah.
and seeing all this growth and seeing how now, even with the pandemic,
Yeah.
e-commerce and sales and retail on e-commerce is still sort of that saving factor behind how businesses can continue to thrive and
Right.
grow
Yeah.
in this current new normal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm happy that we sort of over the past 10 years have laid the groundwork. Right now, I'm working on bringing other brands, other sellers from all over the world
Yeah.
into Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I see my next step towards contributing back to this e-commerce industry.
That's awesome. So I really appreciate your journey, especially when you start from that ground floor. That's where you really connect with the users. Because technology is great, but at the end of the day, we are here to enable the people who are in the warehouse and the shop floor. And if they don't understand or they adopt the technology, obviously technology is not going to get any value. It's simply going to sit in somewhere in the executive room. What's the point of that technology? So I'm glad that you at least had that background and you are able to connect with the users and able to relate with the users. And you mentioned that you were really hardworking, which is phenomenal as well. Because those are the people who really rise to the top. And obviously, you have shown that you are there, not only just with your recognition, the kind of work you have done, but also with the knowledge. And that's what is important for the executives. So obviously, we are going to dig into the cross-border aspects of the e-commerce. That's where the real opportunities are going to be. But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, Kevin. And that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
The word I have is our business. We look at this report called the Google Temasek report.
Yeah.
And that report has never been accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's always underestimated the growth.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Every year when they reissue that report,
they
have to move the numbers up.
Yeah.
The latest report for 2021 is estimating that the internet business in Southeast Asia is going to hit the $1 trillion number in 2030.
Yeah.
Right. In the moment I mentioned the pandemic, it's a tough situation for everybody.
Yeah.
But e-commerce is really driving internet growth right now.
Yeah.
Some of the companies that we're managing are growing 20-30% year on year.
Oh, wow.
This is with retail shrinking, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the overall average numbers across Southeast Asia, 2020 to 2021, it's a 49% growth, 49% year on year growth.
Oh,
and it's estimated, I think, 20% CAGR to 2025. So I think the 20% CAGR is always that number, but then the floor keeps rising in this report. So the growth is there.
Yeah.
and you see it in people's behavior why this growth is there. It's very, very clear. Shopping online, e-commerce is no longer just a once a month activity or a once a year activity. I think the big change in my observation has been groceries. The moment groceries has started to pick up in Southeast Asia, it's a daily thing. Like normal people can participate now in e-commerce. You're no longer just scouring for deals or looking for the things that you cannot get offline. You're buying your vegetables, your rice, your cooking oil, your bread online. When that becomes the normal behavior, you quickly transcend to other things as well, right? You buy furniture, you buy clothes, buy beauty products, you buy your light bulbs, everything in the house that you can buy, you buy online. I think so. Now I'm living in Vienna, right? And I think that for people from North America, from Europe, it's normal. You've had e-commerce for so long. Southeast Asia, this has been a turning point. I've seen that growth where people like my dad that wouldn't shop online. It's like somebody's going to steal my credit card number. Now he shops online. The elder people are shopping online as well. So this is a big change, and I cannot stress enough that the moment behavior changes, it's a solid base for growth, and we're just going to continue to see this. That's my personal belief in growth.
Oh, wow. So I am actually going to touch on some of the points that you mentioned. And that is going to be, number one, as you have lived in a lot of different continents and countries, I have lived in a lot of different countries as well. And you mentioned that, for Malaysia, for Southeast Asia, this is a training ground, and North America and Europe, they already sort of had the e-commerce presence. But in my experience, when I compare, let's say, North America, US, Canada, I'm not too sure about Europe because I have not spent as much time in Europe. But when I compare, let's say, the US or Canada with countries like Singapore or, Hong Kong, or places like even your Philippines or India or in fact Malaysia, right? The adoption of social commerce, adoption of technology is way higher. The appetite is way higher. And that is probably driving these opportunities in the North American market. If you look at it, to be honest, the kind of trends that you are seeing in the emerging market, they still don't exist in North America. When you look at grocery shopping, so you mentioned that, people are shopping grocery in the South Asian market. They still don't shop in the US and Canada. And I don't think that is going to change. Sure, with COVID, there are some changes in the understand and appetite of the market. But overall, from the technology adoption perspective, the US and Canada, they are slightly behind compared to your Asian countries. Have you experienced the same from your experience, or do you feel indifferent?
I think the speed of growth. The speed of growth is very evident in Southeast Asia. Why? Number one, you have examples that you can copy. A lot of what we see in Southeast Asia today is put there because it's copying. Oh, this was successful in North America, in Canada. This was successful in Europe. Let's now bring it to Southeast Asia because emerging markets, right? Let's bring all the technology know-how and put it there. So a bit is that there's already sort of a roadmap that's been charted, and you can see this acceleration in the growth, right? The second thing is, I always believe that it's easier to introduce something new than to change habits or behavior.
Right.
This is something where today, if you so even in Southeast Asia, getting internet access is sort of growing. It's sort of giving you new access today, right? And the moment you have that, it's not that you have to wait 5 or 10 years after using the internet to suddenly see this thing called e-commerce, shopping online. The moment you connect to the internet, you're suddenly able to shop online. So that's the new thing that immediately becomes part of your behavior, and it's easier to accept. I think in North America, in Europe, like you've gotten the internet, and it's used for emails, for work, for 5-10 years before you even start getting e-commerce, right? So that change, the acceptance of change is much more clear or evident in Southeast Asia. I think that's why people are more excited about these things maybe in Southeast Asia. The third thing is we've had challenges with infrastructure before this. Right. So yes, there are people who are willing to shop online, want to shop online. It's new habit building. But the infrastructure has completely changed over the past, let's say, 5 years. You have companies like Grab coming in doing like door-to-door delivery or food delivery, right? All the delivery companies in the market have had to increase their capability, tech-wise, operational-wise, to be able to support, capacity-wise, to be able to support e-commerce. So that infrastructure suddenly comes in, and you have people willing to embrace this change. And for them, it's not a 10-step change. It's like, hey, I'm here now, and I can do it, and I'm going to do it. So I think that's why you're getting all this growth squeezed and compressed into a decade as opposed to 20 years, right? And it's just continuing to grow that way.
Very interesting. So let's touch on the cross-border aspect, and especially when I look at the South Asian market, one of the reasons why the cross-border is so prevalent in that specific part of the world is going to be because the countries are super connected. People are traveling a lot in different countries. I know a lot of friends that are traveling from Malaysia to Singapore, just to work, I guess, right? And they travel to some of the neighboring countries as well. So is that the reason why the cross-border commerce is so prevalent in that world, or are there any other factors that are driving the cross-border commerce?
So cross-border commerce in I think globally, has been driven by manufacturing, cheap manufacturing from China, right? So that export has sort of built that. And where we see that this has helped to pave the road for further cross-border e-commerce is that people are ready to look out of their own countries to purchase products. Again, I go back to infrastructure. Because it's not easy to charter a plane. If you have one product, but now you have enough load that's coming into countries through e-commerce that people can piggyback along. So you have hubs in Hong Kong, hubs in Shenzhen, where products can fly across the world and then come into Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia as a network of countries as well, with either Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia as a hub. You could potentially serve the entire of Southeast Asia, right? So that's why I'm excited about this. If you look at the demographics as well, Southeast Asia has been one of the, let's say, economic blocks in the world that has been growing with no more double-digit GDP growth, percentage GDP growth. But let's say there are still countries that hit the 5-7% GDP year-on-year GDP growth. So you now get population that starts to build disposable income, and want to spend more, right? And that's where we think that people now look at not just products because it's cheaper or it's more efficient to get direct from manufacturer from China, but also now I want access to all the brands in the world. You have people trying to shop from I don't know, a UK website, but then there's no way to ship it in. You have people who try to shop from a US website because that's the only place where I can get the special part for my car, for example, right? You have this group of people with disposable income who are looking to spend the money, but have no way to do this. And for me, for the business side, for the brand side, e-commerce is now, like I said, fully activated. There's a network across Southeast Asia. All you have to choose is to say, yes, I want it. I'm willing to invest in it. And it's no more I have to fly 20 hours to get to Southeast Asia, meet a guy I don't know, shake his hand, and try to agree to a business deal. You have so many different ways of coming into Southeast Asia right now. And I think that e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, gives you that ease of entering Southeast Asia, the ticket to Southeast Asia, let's say, through e-commerce.
Okay, so very interesting. So let's say if I'm the manufacturer in the US, and obviously I keep reading about these advancements that the South Asian market is making, and I may have a product category that I feel is probably going to be a right fit for that market. So now let's say if I am trying to get a ticket to Southeast Asia to penetrate the opportunities offered by Southeast Asia, right? So what are the things that I need to keep in mind if I am trying to penetrate that market and I am trying to capitalize on some of these cross-border opportunities to be able to sell to the consumers in that specific world? How do I plan the business model around this opportunity? How do I start?
Right. I think you hit on the right focus first. Is it the right category?
Right. Yeah.
Right now, I would look at categories such as, so the top three categories would be fashion, home and
Okay.
living, health and beauty, electronics.
Okay.
If you're in this sort of category,
Yeah.
You can find an easy way to get into Southeast Asia.
Okay.
The next is to find a fit to what the population spends and to have a strategy around how do you go in. Southeast Asia Southeast Asia is 6 active e-commerce countries right now. Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
How to fit your strategy around where you want to go. And this has a few factors. Are you selling a product where you want to have the biggest number of population so that you can address more people?
Yeah.
Are you trying to sell a product that's a bit niche, higher price point?
Okay.
Therefore, you want to enter into a country that's more able to afford. So,
Right.
for example, most of the European brands that we consult or advise,
Right.
we have a strategy because of the different price points that we have.
Yeah.
That we say, let's do Singapore.
Okay.
Why? Its infrastructure is very good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of transparency for you, right?
Yeah.
For the brand.
Yeah.
Because everything is almost written down in forms in Singapore. And the basket size as well is on the high side. The average basket size that an online consumer will buy is around 30, 40 euros or US dollars right now.
Right. Yeah.
This includes the grocery purchases. So that's why it's also brought down, right?
Yeah.
And then we would say, then we look into Malaysia, Thailand.
Yeah.
Why Malaysia, Thailand is second biggest basket size, second biggest GDP per capita, and also enough infrastructure and also enough population to make it interesting to make the effort over there. So now you have your entry strategy, right?
Okay.
Then we're talking about where do you sell?
Right.
Do you open a brand.com? Do you do a Facebook sales?
Yeah.
My personal advice would be to look at one of the marketplaces.
Okay.
So you have the Lazadas, the Shoppees, which are general marketplaces, and these have tremendous amount of traffic. So that's why you would choose a marketplace. So you don't have to self-invest on your own traffic or most of the traffic yourself, right? So I would go for one of these top marketplaces. We also would look at vertical marketplaces. So there are specific fashion plays, or specific health and beauty plays where there will be specific marketplaces or websites that can help your brand in those areas, right? So once you have identified, do you have the right product? What's the price point? Which country you want to go in? Which marketplace? Then you get into the country. Then it's time to do the work. The one point that we always stress is, what's your goal of entering Southeast Asia? Right? Is it to create awareness or is it to hit growth sales immediately? Because if you don't have presence, you would need to expect, and this is where the dollars and cents and where people then say, yes, I'm ready, or yes, I'm not. No, I'm not ready, right?
Exactly.
So you would expect to spend 10 to 20% of your revenues reinvested into driving awareness and traffic. And this goes on for the first 3, 4, 5 months, and then you optimize, and soon you will have brand presence, and that's your new, you can say that you're a brand now that's globalized with presence in Southeast Asia. So that would be the simple way of entering Southeast Asia.
Very interesting. So when we look at the commerce, obviously people are always thinking about, the product categories that you mentioned, that, go for fashion, go for electronics, go for health and beauty are 3 categories. And obviously based on the product price point, we can look at the countries that can really afford these product categories, and we can strategize around that. But when we look at the other categories and I don't know if the B2B manufacturers or the distributors are going to have any play in these countries. So when you think of the South Asian market, the potential is primarily going to be just in those 3 categories, or are there any other opportunities for the other manufacturers when you think of, I don't know, maybe automotive, part suppliers or aerospace defense. There are so many different manufacturing categories. In the B2B space, you look at construction suppliers. Are they going to have any opportunities in that market as well? Or are they the opportunities primarily either in the FMCG sector or really the food and beverage? I guess those 2 are the common ones that we typically hear when we think of e-commerce. But I'm looking more for the B2B insights.
On the B2B insights, if your end product is going to a if you're selling machinery, for example,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It would sort of depend on what type of machinery you're selling. So the example of auto parts that you
Yeah.
you said,
Yeah.
that I think would fit well as well into
Okay.
an e-commerce sort of play.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, are you trying to target a distributor who's going to buy from you? So
Yeah.
this is an Alibaba.com kind of business,
Yeah.
right? To give an analogy, or are you trying to do an Amazon style of business where you're actually targeting the end consumer?
Yeah.
My expertise are primarily in the Amazon style end consumer.
Okay.
And I think that you can bring some of the Alibaba style B2B business
Okay.
into the Amazon style. So if you talk about packaging material, if you talk about auto parts,
Yeah.
I think all those can transcend and go into the Amazon style business. I'll tell you why. Because shopping on e-commerce for marketplace,
Yeah.
it's not just done by end consumers. It's
Okay.
also done by companies these days. Why? It's so what they do is they would use a Lazada or a Shopee as a tool to plan their budget,
Yeah.
to plan their purchasing for the year.
Yeah.
You would have stationery, for example,
Okay.
bought through also all these marketplaces for companies as well. So if that's a B2B play,
Yeah.
I think it does narrow down a little bit the categories that would be enabled for B2B e-commerce in that sense, especially cross-border.
Okay.
Because if you're trying to sell construction parts, there's a lot of other factors to take into account, right? The transportation,
Yeah.
the logistics,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
certification,
Yeah.
the customization as well.
Yeah.
And this then works much better when there's a more one-to-one contact in terms of building the bill of material, building of the engineering requirements,
Yeah.
the specifications for the material, and so on and so forth. That I'm not so sure Southeast Asia would be ripe for the taking yet for those kinds of businesses.
Okay, very interesting. So since you mentioned the logistics and transportation, and that was probably going to be my next question, okay, sure. I mean, when I'm planning for the strategy as the manufacturer and I'm trying to penetrate these markets, so I can go in these markets and I can probably tap into these marketplaces. But I still need to have my shipping infrastructure, the logistics infrastructure figured out to be able to send the product. So what are going to be my options? Am I going to be relying on, let's say, these marketplaces to be able to ship these products? Am I going to be working with the brokers that are going to be responsible for specific hubs or the countries? So what are my options? Let's say if I'm trying to penetrate the South Asian market and I'm trying to figure out my logistics, how that is going to work, and if it is going to be profitable enough to be able to ship the products.
This is very, very common question. I'm glad you brought it up. So I think there are generally two options, or three options, I guess you could say. The first option is to ship from the destination. So wherever you have your products, you ship it from there. Here, it gives you the gain that you can not commit your stock in Southeast Asia, so you don't have to worry about it. If you ship one item, it goes through. Plus the fact that you have de minimis in Southeast Asia. So de minimis means that if it's shipped for personal usage below a certain threshold, then no duties has to be paid. So that's one of the reasons that people still buy things overseas, because it does compensate for the shipping costs when you don't have the 10% or 15% duties on the other end to pay for, right? So that's the interesting part about this. The challenge about this is that you would need to work with partners or logistics partners that have a load into those countries and are able to ship it to you, provide to you at a relevant cost. We, as a company, I know I don't really want to talk about the company yet, but we've looked into this and we're sort of building a lane that allows us to ship from Europe to Southeast Asia at a reasonable cost. And that's one of the opportunities that we provide for people who are interested to say, I am interested, but I don't know, should I ship 100 pieces of my stock? Or should I ship only one piece at a time? So that's available. It's a bit more expensive, but it lets you enter the market really, really quick. You do get a bit of cost savings from the de minimis. And you get to see which of your products work, which then leads you to the second option, which is now I know which product can sell. I'm going to move some of the products into Southeast Asia. This means that you either sea freight or you air freight a bigger bulk of shipment into Southeast Asia. There are many service providers, warehouse service providers, fulfillment service providers who can help you not just fulfill one country, but now you're in Southeast Asia. right?
Yeah,
And I said before, Southeast Asia, once you're in Southeast Asia, there's a network through all of Southeast Asia. So once you get your products in there, there are ways to use bonded warehouses. There are ways to use what I was working on, the digital pre-trade zone, which is in Malaysia, to also store your products, but then ship it across Southeast Asia. So that's your second option, right? The challenge here would be, how do you deal with customs? How do you make sure that you are able to clear and not and at the best optimized cost?
Right.
You also need an entity. There are services called importer on records, which help you to facilitate all those custom clearances. And have your products in Southeast Asia. This brings me to the third option, or 2.5, is that, and I think we discussed this previously when we were talking to each other. What about reverse logistics? What about returns? The nightmare of e-commerce, right? So what we've done, or what we've seen in the past, both in Lazada and what I do today, is that when there's a return, to take that one item, ship it back to the home country, it doesn't always make sense, right? It's expensive, right? I don't know if you know this, like in logistics, we say, like, the more we pass the box around, the more handovers there are, the more likely it is to be damaged, right? So what we do is to try to avoid this. We recycle products into a local warehouse.
Interesting.
And we try to resell the moment the next order comes in. So even if you're on option 1, let's say, the moment the next order comes in, instead of shipping it from the home destination, we say we already have this product in the destination, from the origin. We already have this in the destination warehouse. Let's ship it from there. And we've seen savings of up to 60% using this method. Right?
Oh, wow.
So that's sort of giving you a feel of the different play. Of course, I think the best when it comes to logistics is to plan, forecast, and try to anticipate all this. And you can only do that once you have the data flowing in. So starting with an option 1, flying in from the origin to the customer, having a bit of data to play around with, putting a bit of stock into Southeast Asia, using it as a hub for the rest of Southeast Asia, and then recycling any returns into that hub so that you don't have to ship it all the way back to North America or Europe. Is probably the most cost-effective way of managing the logistics for cross-border e-commerce today.
Okay, very interesting. So there are a lot of flavors, and obviously right now we are talking about slightly newer businesses that are trying to penetrate into the Southeast Asia, but obviously it will be beneficial to touch on some of the growing or slightly more established business if they are trying to plan their logistics and warehouse. And you mentioned you need to have legal entities in some places. So let's say if I'm trying to penetrate all of those 7 countries that you mentioned, and you also mentioned that you probably will benefit by having the local warehouse, but we need to plan for, let's say, the custom, the duties, the legalities, all of that. So let's say if I'm planning for my warehouse, whether I'm a starting business or I am slightly more grown business. So how would you structure these warehouses? Are you going to incorporate each of the warehouse in each of the countries, or are you going to be simply establishing this at a hub, and then you are going to be working with an entity that can help you with the legality and the custom, and you are not going to have legal entity in those 7 countries? Otherwise, there's so much process and admin overhead when you think about it. I mean, the market and opportunity is great. But now I have to do books for Malaysia, I have to do books for my Indonesia. Oh boy. So how do you typically propose for businesses? What is the most optimum structure as you sort of build upon as you are penetrating the South Asian market?
Right. This is a very good question. I mean, the answer is usually a very practical answer. I don't like to promise people like the dreams and then not be able to achieve it.
Exactly. Right.
We go back to our strategy. I remember like when you said like, oh, I'm thinking about going to Southeast Asia. What should I look at first, right? And I said Singapore, I said Malaysia, I said Thailand. Now, I would say if you're not sure, it depends on your budget as well. If you're not sure, go with option 1. Go with option 1, ship it in. Now, if you're growing business and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to spend, right? But how much do I want to spend? Then look, this is going to be something that can be 10% of your entire business revenue. So you need to have a budget around that can manage that is going to be 10% of your revenue. The practical proposal would be put it in a hub in Malaysia. Because of the cost of warehousing is much cheaper in Malaysia. Use option 1 to ship from Malaysia to Singapore. And option 1 to ship from Malaysia to Thailand. And as your business grows in Singapore and business grows in Thailand, then we look at the numbers. We review this with you. We look at the numbers. We say like, hey, what can we gain by putting the products in Singapore? Do we gain in business growth? because that's the real reason we would invest more, right? If I'm investing and I don't grow my business, then what's the point? If I gain in business growth because putting it in Singapore allows me to do instant returns, instant exchanges, and that in my business is very important because of the type of product I'm selling, then it's worth it. Let's go start invest in a warehouse in Singapore as well. If it doesn't, then we continue that growth in Malaysia. Now then, if we talk about, let's go to the Philippines and let's go to Vietnam and Indonesia, and this is a bit further, and we're trying to cover more ground. Then we also have maybe a city approach. Like, do we want to just target Jakarta first, Surabaya later? Do we want to say in Vietnam it's Saigon and Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, for example? Do we want to have warehouses there? Then those discussions come into play once we are more comfortable with how much growth we've had and what is the real reason we want to invest. We would never say let's just build a warehouse there because we want to figure it out, right? That's it. Now the step to get there, again, the most practical would be get in fast, get data fast, and see where you need to pivot or change, right? So the services you would need would be, how do if my products need to be registered? Are there entities that can help me to do this? And then these are services that we provide and you can find as well in the market. Some countries require that when you're on a marketplace, you need a local entity. So, and they're called merchant on record. And this is also something that you could get business partners who can work with you to do this on your behalf as well. And this is something that we do all the time. And this is how we support businesses to quickly enter Southeast Asia and grow their business. It's worry-free. It's proven that it works. And like I said, let's do it in a practical way where if you invest and if you want to grow something, let's make sure that you're investing for a reason. So to wrap it up, I would say, like, put it in Malaysia, service Singapore, service Thailand. That's the easiest, fastest way for you to see how fast your product can grow in Southeast Asia.
Okay, very interesting. So obviously, when you touched on the different regulations and the entities, and you mentioned that, you need to have the legal entity in some of the countries if you are trying to sell there. Now, let's say if I'm from North America and I've never been to that part of the world, okay, and obviously I'm going to have a little bit of fear insecurities, and I know that you mentioned the solution where we can bring a business partner and we can probably have entity, but for me, if I have never done that arrangement before, I don't know how that is going to work, because I am actually trying to create an entity. I am trying to bring somebody who I don't know, I don't trust, I have probably never done business with them. So number one question, which are the countries that are going to require the entities, and how is the legality going to work? So let's say if I am working with a company, they are promising that, I am going to place my guy in your legal entity, okay, and then you will be able to create that legal entity because you probably don't have citizenship of Malaysia or the Philippines. That's the reason why you need to have my guy on your legal papers, that you both sort of own that entity. So how does this arrangement typically work? Have you seen any sort of conflict because of the arrangement? And which are the countries that are going to require the legal entity?
When you want to bring a product into a country, there must be an accepting party on the end. That's usually a company,
right?
So you have your consignee and you have your consignor, right? And then the consignee has to be in the country that's receiving the product, right? And that's where that party is responsible for clearing customs, responsible for the goods in the country. And if there's anything wrong, that's where the regulators would talk to. Right? And that's why you need the entity. And this is, every country needs this entity that if you want to bring it in bulk and clear it, right? So it's a very common practice these days to have the importer on record, which is going to be this entity that manages that clearance. They clear it on your behalf. They respond to regulators on your behalf, and they do all the filing and documentations on. And that's if you search today important record, more and more people are coming to this business. So it's not a fly by night operation. It's something that's becoming more common to facilitate cross-border trade. It's one of those situations where regulation hasn't kept up with how people are doing business these days. Right. And then now, how do I feel safe? I'm going to give my product to somebody else. Like where do I have? So that there are contracts that can be put in place to ensure your safety.
Okay.
There's also ways to work with the marketplaces where you register with your original entity.
Okay.
So payment of when you sell goes to you.
Okay.
The products physically are here, and you can have some kind of bond or performance bond or some kind of guarantee between two of you for those products, right? So it depends on how comfortable you are.
Yeah.
And there are ways always to put security in place.
Yeah.
But we've had no problems. We've been doing this and helping companies do this.
Yeah.
Of course, we were coming as ex-executives of these marketplaces. So there's sort of a trust that if you want to come into the country, this is who you talk to, right? And also our client list are reputable companies. So we would also share with you, like, hey, here's who we work with. This is how we do it for them. So I can connect you with them, and you can go talk to them, and you see, and this is the record and everything. So there's a bit of trust building. I agree, still to be done.
Yeah.
And we would put security in place so that through the contracts, through the operations, through who gets the payment and the payment flow, that all parties are comfortable, and that then we can move from getting to know each other, getting to know how work gets done, to, hey, let's have a meeting next week because I have an idea of how to build a new campaign for your product that's going to grow, and we focus on the business instead, right? So all this takes a while to get it done, but once you get it done, then it's as if you can run your business from where you sit right now, even, right?
Yeah, so I am going to have one question related to the contract comment that you mentioned. So let's say, if I am the manufacturer here in North America and I am trying to set up my contract, right? So typically, even in the local situation where I am dealing with another business, let's say if I'm in California, I'm dealing with a business in Pennsylvania. Typically, the court of law and the choice of law that you're going to have, it's going to be per state. Now we are talking about international transactions. Okay, so you maybe somewhere in Malaysia or Philippines or, and I don't have access to those markets. Even if I have to visit those countries, I probably require visa, so many different things. Now here we are trying to get into the contract, right? So this is more of the international transaction. So how is the contract going to work? What is going to be the choice of law? So let's say if I have the dispute, I sent you my products to you, and now that could be like, I don't know, man, maybe $100,000, $200,000, or $500,000. And now I have no idea where those products are, and I'm trying to find it out. So what is going to be the choice of law in the contract? Is it going to be one entity in the US? Or is it going to be some of the international entity? Do I need to travel now to the Philippines to find out where my products are? Or what am I doing here?
So the country or where the entity, the law, how the contract is interpreted, I think comes up in a negotiation. And it depends how. So it depends on who wants what more.
Yeah.
Right. It's part of the negotiation. So my lawyer will talk to your lawyer, and we go back and forth, and then the governing laws of which country that governs the contract will typically come up. We typically use Singapore as well, if there's no comfort, because it's a very neutral ground and very open for international business.
Right.
So it's very neutral. Singapore, rarely we would have issues with that with Singapore, but if there are, then we would then discuss a compromise somehow, right? Somewhere where it's neutral, where we both say, like, okay, we both can accept that country. I think having a home ground country becomes a bit one-sided in the contract. So it's typically much better when you have a intermediary country that you can agree to. And then as well, we would generally have a clause for arbitration to be done before we even go to the courts if there's any issue, right?
Yeah.
And arbitration can be done in international arbitration centers, which covers these cases as well. Yeah. So we've not. So I don't want to speak too much about this because we've not had any issues with contract. It's all business and we agree to it.
Yeah.
But I know, like, when we talk to the lawyers, these were all the things under consideration, and we put in the contract, and then we sign off on it. And touch wood, so far we've never had to use pull a clause on the contract to say, now this is what's going to happen. Right. Everything has been good so far. But yes, it is a question. It is a big question.
Yeah.
And for Southeast Asia, Singapore would be the most, let's say, internationally accepted country for law, for the contracts.
Amazing. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
I over the past 1 year that I've been talking to companies and trying to share what's going on in Southeast Asia, I think there's a big gap in awareness. And I say, like, read and get awareness, and I'm happy to share more about what's going on in Southeast Asia, because once you hear of the opportunities that's in Southeast Asia, then the mind starts clicking, right? If every businessman is like, okay, there's an opportunity now. What do I do? Like, okay, how can I take advantage of this opportunity? And then we're here to talk to you to figure out how we can work things out for you. At the end of the day, it's a region that's 6 countries.
Yeah.
I say 6 because this is where we focus on, and where the internet economy has really boomed. It's 6 countries that are in one region, so there's advantages. But it's 6 countries with different languages and cultures, so there's also the need to know locally what's going on. But there's 6 countries with 600 million people.
Wow.
That's double of the US. I don't know how many times of Canada. And it's 600 million people that still has a birth rate that's growing, right? So it's high birth rate. So the population is still growing. Number of internet users are still growing. Right? We talk about growth just now. It's a land that's amazing. Everything's still growing. You've got also the number of people who are online, who are just made their first online purchases, also growing. That's like, I think it was like 60 million over the past 2 years. New users who have bought online. Just read about all this and make that decision to say, I want to enter Southeast Asia, and reach out to don't just reach out to me, reach out to other people who can help you, because there's a lot of interest and a lot of companies coming up in Southeast Asia who are helping companies to come into Southeast Asia. So be aware of this. It's right now probably 5 to 10 years behind the China boom. So it's the right time to lay the groundwork, the right time to eye this region, 4th biggest economic bloc in the world. It's the right time to eye this region and say, how can I fit Southeast Asia into my business strategy? So that would be what I say. Like, it's exciting, right? And US business owners have the choice to make. Do I want in or not on this piece of the pie?
Okay, amazing. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be, there is no question that the market is booming, the population is there, who has significant appetite overall from the consumption perspective. And then you have the resources as well that can help you get access to the market. So at least pay attention to that and research how you can penetrate into these opportunities. On that note, Kevin, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Thank you.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Kevin, head over to deeplinks.com. It's DEEPLYNX.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Krisa Klein, who discusses the supply chain nuances of the apparel industry and its unique challenges. Also, the interview with Sarah Barnes-Humphrey from Shibs, who shares her knowledge of the international supply chain and trading. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.